Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Devil Wears Prada 2, starring Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, Justin Theroux, Simone Ashley, Lucy Liu, Kenneth Branagh, and Stanley Tucci, directed by David Frankel. Now, I have seen the movie twice, and what do I think of it? Well, it's gonna be, let's see how this goes. Let's get into the movie. We open the movie with Andrea, or Andy Sachs for short, returned by Anne Hathaway, going to work where she wins an award called the NYPC for Best Journalism, and gets a text message saying she, along with her company, getting fired, while Irv Ravitz, who was briefly in the last movie and played by the same actor, Tibor Feldman, and his son Jay see the humiliation Andy is going through on the internet and feels bad for her and decides to hire her back at Runway Fashion Magazine with her old boss Miranda Priestley, returned by Meryl Streep, along with her worker for years Nigel, returned by Stanley Tucci, and Andy hears about it while in an apartment with her roommate Lily, returned by Tracy Toms, talking while Miranda is getting publicly fooled and is being too old fashioned with is a disaster and gets blamed for absolutely everything at like Speedlash. And Miranda tells her husband Stuart, played by Kenneth Branagh, as she gets called from Irv, and that's when he thinks about rehiring Andy at the Runway Fashion Magazine, where she used to work at. And I like seeing the returning characters, despite not all of them return. Like Nate didn't return because he moved to Boston at the end of the last film, which was for the best. Andy decides to take Irv's offer for twice as much money than before, and one of her friends advises Andy to write a novel about Miranda. And the next day comes, and Miranda and Nigel see Andy in her office to be the senior editor in chief. And Miranda is still as harsh as she was 20 years ago. As I was getting confused by what this plot was after two viewings of this movie, as I'm not in the fashion business, as Miranda and Nigel go to the office of Emily Charlton, returned by Emily Blunt, as she's just as worse as Miranda from the last movie. But and this time she's just as nasty as to Miranda and Nigel as much as Andy. And Miranda forces Andy to take the train, as the editing in this felt kind of choppy. Next day comes, and Andy meets Charlie and Amari, who is Miranda's assistant and played by Simone Ashley, who puts Andy in a crumpled up office. And Nigel takes her to the cafeteria to have lunch together, and Nigel tells Andy Andy Irv is thinking about promoting Miranda for a big job, and Andy has a new secretary named Jin, whom explains Miranda has to put her own code up because in the last movie she threw them at her assistants, and people post some bad news for Miranda on social media. And at the office, Andy tries to surprise Miranda and Charlie, explaining how Miranda hasn't had an interview with Sasha Barnes, played by Lucy Liu. And believe it or not, neither has Andy. And Andy is in a meeting with Miranda and Nigel, as well as other employees. And Miranda tells Andy to never interrupt an interview, or a meeting, excuse me. And Andy asks Nigel how to impress Miranda and thinks about getting an interview with Sasha Barnes. And the acting in this was fine, but not as good as the original Devil Wears Prada, as it's not an award winning by any means necessary. Andy goes to Emily's office for an interview and asks her human has Emily is a divorced mother, and Andy has left New York for 15 years until she came back, and she doesn't have a family of her own, while Irv chews out Miranda and for Andy not writing connecting stories until Andy brings up Sasha Barnes and lies to her about having an interview, as she hasn't had an interview in over 3 years. And Lily's friend gets a hold of Sasha and her agent or whatever on her own time, And Andy goes with Lily to an open house and meets the owner, Peter. And Lily considers getting her an apartment in Peter's building. And Andy gets interrupted by Sasha saying she'll accept an interview with Runway. And I like what Lucy Liu does in this movie for what little she does in this movie, as does Kenneth Branagh, as their performances are good. Andy buys an apartment from Peter, and they go out to dinner together. And the dialogue was nicely written, and the chemistry is cute at best. While Andy considers her friend's proposal to write a book about Miranda, and she gets invited to Miranda's house for special people, as she becomes one of them, and Nigel gets her clothing together and goes over to Miranda's house for a party with a bunch of special people, including Stewart. And the cinematography is good, as this movie has some good shots throughout. Miranda starts to respect Andy because of the story around Sasha Barnes, and Andy moves into her apartment with Peter as she brings him to a work party where it's Irv's birthday, and Emily happens to be there dating Benji, played by Justin Theroux, as I didn't recognize them, as this guy's a chameleon. And Irv thinks about promoting Miranda to her new position, while Nigel wants her position until he dies from a heart attack. And we get to his funeral scene where Stewart plays the violin and Irv passes everything along to his son Jay as her business partner. And Andy believes Jay is unpredictable as far as the company is concerned, while he comes to the building and brings her to the cafeteria. And this type of situation can be a bit scary, and kudos to director David Frankel for pulling off CEO visits with the company, as it's very realistic, as this might be my favorite scene in the movie. Miranda talks with Jay and their new business partners for an hour, maybe a little over, and Jin shows her a clever trick, and Andy figures out what they're saying, and she tells Nigel what she learns, which is they're cutting everything and anyone being in the company for over 5 years, and Andy is dressed to a point. Peter gives her some space. Andy is depressed to a point. Peter gives her some space, and this movie is 5 minutes too long, as the last movie was tight. While she has to go to Italy with Miranda, as she goes to Miranda's house, and she throws Andy out, saying this doesn't concern her, and writes a story about Miranda's biography. And next day comes, and they have a meeting with Nigel as he suggests music by Lady Gaga. And they only take Ubers and fly in coach in an airplane instead of first class, as they get to Italy, which looks tremendous for the second half of the movie. And to be fair, I don't know which location in Italy, but maybe somebody can tell me that in the comments. I don't know. Emily and Benji are in a store while Andy is hypnotized by them, and go to their hotel rooms as Emily deals with her ex-husband and kids, with Andy coming to the room and sneaks around with her, and she encounters Nigel and takes off with her to Benji's house in Italy. And they talk pulling off Benji taking over the company from Jay, while they meet with Jay, and she gets back to Miranda, Nigel, and Amari to get to the building where they're going to have dinner together. Miranda knows something is up with Andy while she's trying to do the right thing, and encounters Emily at an outside restaurant in Italy. And Andy wants to tell Miranda, while she takes it too hard and says her signature line, "That's all," after hearing Benji and Emily wanting to take over Runway. And Emily is completely nasty in this movie. But like I said in the last show, Emily Blunt pulls that character off very well. Andy doesn't want to publish her book about Miranda's biography with Andy, Miranda, and Nigel are at a dinner. And Benji and Emily and others are there, as Miranda knows his plan with Jay and chats with him, and it feels pretty upset about it, and comes back to the room and Stuart being in there, and Miranda doesn't know when it's time for her to be over with Runway, And this isn't the best performance by Meryl Streep, as that belongs to the movies that she's been nominated for and she won the Oscar, and she can't be nominated for this performance twice, can she? That's hard for me to say, but I don't think she deserves it twice for this movie. Miranda decides to make Andy call some people and to backtrack Jay's plan for Runaway, and Sheen goes to the phone on the phone all day long while Miranda watches the show after show while talking with Lady Gaga, and Andy tells Miranda that her plan will work if she left and Andy have with Andy and have Nigel hosting the show for a while while she's gone to settle Jay's deal. And at this point, I'm confused on what in the hell is going on at this point in the movie. Emily and Benji talk with Jay, and Jay's sold Runaway was taken away from Benji, and Emily, while Andy and Miranda go to Sasha's house and give her the company as they drive back to Miranda, wanting Andy to publish her biography, as Andy doesn't know how she figured it out, while she knows she'll make a fortune out of it, which makes perfect sense, writing about her boss and how demanding she is, and Andy talking with Lily and gives her gifts and goes back home to Peter while speaking Italian to each other, and they say it's a pleasure to see you again, and get back together as a couple while Andy meets with Emily with blonde hair at a restaurant, and they have lunch together, and she talks about becoming friends with Andy, and Andy accepts as Benji broke up with her, and Andy says she doesn't need him, and she goes back to work at Runway doing, along with Jin, Nigel, Charlie, Amari, and Miranda, as the climax was fine. And did this need a sequel? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 6.7 out of 10. This is not as good as the original movie, and I like seeing the returning characters from the original, despite not all of them return. And it was for the best. And it was for the best. While I was confused for the first half of the plot, like what in the hell is going on, and same with the ending plot on in some scenes. And this is longer than the previous movie by 12 minutes. And some of the 5 minutes could have been in the cutting room floor out of the movie, and the acting was fine, but again, I don't think this is an Oscar-worthy movie. Oh, but maybe the costume designing, but Meryl Streep shouldn't be nominated for the same performance twice, so she doesn't deserve it, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. As the editing in this movie was kind of choppy, for what little they do in this movie, Lucy Liu and Kenneth Branagh's performances are good, as I liked them in the movie, and the dialogue was nicely written, and the chemistry between Anne Hathaway and Peter is cute at best, and the cinematography is good in this movie. It has some good shots, and kudos to director David Frankel for pulling off CEO visiting the building. Well done, as that is my favorite scene in the movie, sir. Italy looks tremendous for the second half of the movie, and I said in the last show, Emily Blunt comes off nasty, as she pulls it off very well. And this is a recommendation for the movie, despite this isn't as good as the original Devil Wears Prada. And despite I like Meryl Streep and her performance was good, but this isn't her best performance, as it belongs to the other movies she's been nominated and won the Oscar for, including this original film, as she can't pull a nomination twice for the same role. And did this need a sequel? Absolutely not, but fans begged for it at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, I would say watch this movie one time for yourself and judge based on that. As in my opinion, did this need a sequel? But it's making so much money that they'll plan on doing more of this. So I would like to thank you guys for joining me for the Devil Wears Prada retrospective. And until they ever make a third film, that's all.